Now, all this sounds great on paper. Congress giving money to the states to give the local school districts to harden campuses. The problem is, it's only $50 million. There are 90,000 school districts coast to coast, so they have schools themselves, and do the math. That's about $500 per school. Please, get serious here. Secure the schools and arm the teachers and staff. And in Florida, that solution is included in a new piece of legislation that was signed into law by the governor last week. Good, great, wonderful. However, there are other elements that are not so good and not so great and not so wonderful, and that is why the National Rifle Association is suing. Joining me now from Los Angeles, California, CEO and senior partner at Michel and Associates Law Firm, counsel for the National Rifle Association, and expert on federal firearms law, C.D. Michel. C.D., I think what we're seeing in Florida is a classic, well, I call it a knee-jerk reaction to a tragedy that took place in Parkland. In this legislation that was passed, there is some good and there is some bad. But it's unfortunate that it's been interwoven together, and that's why the NRA is kind of painted into a corner here and forced to sue.
Right. Look, the strategy of the gun ban lobby is to make guns unavailable to as many people as they possibly can. So whatever prohibiting categories they can come up with, they're going to push for. And this is an example of one of their incremental attempts to make it impossible for a segment of society to own guns, in this case, 18 to 21-year-olds. And a bonus for them is, if they can keep guns away from these younger folks, then they won't get into the shooting sports, because you have to introduce them as youth in order to get them into hunting and target shooting and those kinds of things. Or typically they don't get into it later in life.
Right. It's not unlike if you didn't allow someone to have their First Amendment rights. If you shut them up for the first 5 years of life, then later on in life they might be less likely to use their First Amendment rights. And that's what this is all about. So the legislature in Florida passes this, and it's not all bad. And I want to look at what is good, and there's a couple of things, and that is school safety programs they're paying for. Okay, fine, I don't know exactly how you describe or define school safety programs, but we'll go with that they're funding some sort of school safety programs. Hopefully it's hardening campuses. And the other is a program to arm teachers and staff. Now, these two things, CD, are common sense. We need to make schools safer so maniacs can't just simply access them. We need to harden them like we do our courts and our federal government systems and our state government systems and our local government systems. And we need to give people who are on those campuses the ability to protect the kids. You agree?
Absolutely. We're not trying to force a gun into anybody's hands, but there are lots of able-bodied and psychologically capable teachers who could volunteer to have a firearm there in case of emergency. There's also paid armed guards that you can put in place. But those systems fail, as we saw in Parkland. You can't count on the police to be there all the time, unfortunately. But there are other, hardening campuses seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And even the emergency restraining orders, there's some problems with those. They can be used vindictively, and the process can be the due process can be abused. But as long as they're done and there are procedural safeguards and due process safeguards in place, you could use that as a tool too, and also fix NICS. Something that the NRA has been asking for 20 years. Get the records into the database so that you can actually tell who's not supposed to be able to buy a gun.
Right. Okay, so now back to the bad part of the Florida bill. So this is why the NRA is suing, has to sue. In my opinion, two things that are wrong with what is included in this bill. Number one has to do with age, and the other has to do with the 3-day waiting period. They want to extend to long guns, so it raises the age limit from 18 to 21 to purchase rifles, and then the 3-day waiting period is now applied to long guns. Problem with the age issue. This is my most fundamental problem. It goes to what you were talking about just a few seconds ago here, but it also includes the fact that we have 18-year-olds that we send off to war, and we hand them a rifle, in this case an automatic rifle, possibly an M16, looks very similar to an AR-15, looks similar. Yet when that 18 or 19-year-old comes back, maybe leaves the military, can't purchase a legal firearm of his own? This makes no sense to me, to defend himself.
Right. We'll put a gun in your hand to go fight and maybe die for your country. But when it comes to someone your age potentially fighting for your family or yourself, we don't trust you.
So how do you quantify this? You know, a lot of people will look at our conversation and they'll say, they're just a bunch of 2A purists. They're a bunch of Second Amendment purists. You used a word, incremental. This is the incremental attack on our liberty if you step back and you look at it. That's the way I would quantify it.
They used to call this the slippery slope. I call it now the greased cliff, and that grease is being supplied by elitist billionaires, but like Bloomberg and Soros, who have a vision for society and are determined to spend as much money as they need to enact and manifest their vision for the way we should all live our lives.
So you're going to be a contributing counsel on this case? What's going to be your role?
No, Florida. I've got my hands full in California. We have good lawyers down there who will be helping the NRA out with that lawsuit, and it's a clean lawsuit. You know, there are lots of causes of actions that could be, you know, kitchen sinked into the complaint. They kept it clean, Second Amendment, and you know, ultimately the Supreme Court has to address this issue. Again, what the scope of the Second Amendment's protections are, and this might be a vehicle for that to happen through.
You know, the bottom line is securing schools and protecting our children and protecting our fundamental constitutional rights. They're not mutually exclusive. They can coexist together. CD, thank you.